In this video, I'm going to tell you how you can never run out of things to say, whether you're talking to a close friend you've known for years or someone you've just met. Throughout all of high school, I struggled with talking to people because I never knew what to say. For example, I would go whole lunch breaks talking in a group and I would only say one or two sentences in half an hour. And when talking to people one-on-one, sometimes I would just not know what to say and we would just sit there in silence. But over several years, I've been able to develop a much better way of talking to people so that I can talk to anyone and not run out of things to say. Or if I do run out of things to say, it doesn't feel awkward, and the quality of conversations I'm having are much better, even if the actual volume of things I'm saying to them isn't any higher. The biggest reason why you don't know what to say is because you're not talking to the right people, or at least you're not talking about the right things. So let me explain. When you are talking, as I'm sure you've experienced, when you're talking to someone who you share a lot of interests with, you find it a lot easier to talk to them. I experienced this myself many times. My friend group in high school, we shared some interests, but we didn't share a lot. So I found it a lot harder to talk to them. But there was a group of people in one of my classes who I found easier to talk to than the people in my friend group, because we shared a lot more interests and we share the same humor. It's important to try to talk to people about things that interest you and interest them. Now, if that's someone that you really get along with, there's going to be a lot of overlap, which means you're going to have a lot more things to talk about. If it's someone who you don't know that well, who you don't get along with, there might be only one or two things that you both are really interested in. So there's going to be less to talk about. Now, for those people who you don't necessarily know that well, it's important to try to find what your similarities are so that you can talk about those things. So you can do that by just asking them questions and learning about them. And they'll be happy to answer these questions because everyone likes talking about themselves. You do need to avoid this sounding like a job interview. So after each question, even if they've said something and you don't really care, and show a bit of interest in it, but then just move on to the next thing and keep probing until you find common ground. Now, once you've found common ground, great, you've got something you can easily talk about for a long time. And then every time you see that person, you just talk about that thing. And you can try and probe around more and find some other things to talk about as well that you both enjoy. But you want to try and avoid talking about something that you don't really care about, because the other person's going to be able to tell that you don't really care. Now, you might be thinking, if I'm always talking to someone about the same thing, then isn't that going to be a bit boring? Well, I would say the alternative is that you're talking to them about different things that you don't really care about, which means you're not going to be really engaged in the conversation and you're not really going to have anything interesting to say. So would you rather always talk about the same thing and have it be a really interesting conversation, or talk about a bunch of different things and none of them are very good? Clearly the first option, right? Another thing is there's always going to be more common ground that you share. It just might be a lot harder to find. You know, I was talking to a group of people the other day, and turns out we all watched a certain show from about 10 years ago, or 12 years ago now actually. And it wasn't a very popular show, it was pretty small. Now, the odds that we actually found out that we all liked that show are so low. But now that we have, that's something we can talk about a little bit. Not as much as some of the other things which are a bit bigger, but we can still talk about it a fair bit. That just goes to show that there's always going to be lots of different things that you actually share with any given person. But it's very hard to find them, and you can do that by just stumbling across them, by just talking to that person generally. But if you've really run out of things to say and you can't think of any other common ground, then just keep asking questions and eventually you'll find something like that you both enjoy. Any person is going to share something in common with you. It could be someone who's completely different to you, but there will be at least one or two things, probably a lot more, that you share with them. Now, with these people that you don't share very many things with, they're probably not going to become your really close friends. And that's totally fine, because your close friends are people you share a lot of interests with. And you can't make friends with everyone because there isn't enough things that you share in common with them, which means there isn't enough things to talk to them about to build a really close bond. If you're trying to force being friends with someone, and you notice that it haven't worked, it's probably because there's not enough for you to talk about. You're probably talking about things that they don't really care about, or you don't really care about, which means one of you is disengaged in the conversation, which isn't going to lead to a close friendship. It's as simple as that. Close friendships are built by both people caring about what they're talking about and genuinely wanting to know, not knowing just to keep the conversation going. When you have conversations that you're not really interested in, so say you're talking about sports with someone and you don't really care about sports, even if they really care, it's going to be better if you try and find something else to talk about that you actually care about. And that might mean ending a conversation that seemed like it was going well, but it probably wasn't actually going that well because you weren't asking the right questions and you weren't really seeming really involved. You can be smiling and doing active listening and doing all that stuff, and it's still going to be clear that you don't care about learning about it, and that's because you're not necessarily going to be asking the right questions. For example, if I'm talking about sport and you don't really care, and I say, oh, this team won on the weekend, you're just going to go, yay, good. And you're not going to know what follow-up questions to ask because you don't know anything about sport. So in these situations, even if a conversation might seem like it's going well or it's lasting a long time, that time isn't a good indicator of how good the conversation is. So it's better to ask a new question and try and find a topic that you share in common. Another important thing with this is that you have to really be yourself in order to properly do this, to talk about things that you care about. You know, if you're pretending to be someone else, then you're going to be trying to talk about these things that that person would care about, but not the things that you actually care about. And this just leads to the same thing I was saying before. You have to find things that you care about, which means you have to be yourself in any conversation with anyone. Now, there are some situations where you obviously can't be yourself fully. Like, you don't want to just be disagreeing with everything. It might be better to just not say anything rather than say your thing. But you don't want to lie and say something that goes against one of your beliefs. So in this situation, this is where you just keep probing around and trying to find that common ground. Now, a lot of the time, there's things that you care about a lot, things you care about a little bit, and things you don't care about at all. Now, you might have not found something that you really deeply care about, but this is really a scale. It's not a single yes or no, black and white thing. So you want to just lean towards the things that you care about most and avoid the things you don't really care about. So that means there might be something that you only care about a little bit, you don't really care, but you're more interested in it than some other stuff. Then you want to talk more about that thing than the thing you don't care about as much about. And you still want to be asking questions and trying to find new things that you share in common. So, for example, with my physio, I've been seeing him for about a year and a half now, and I haven't found anything that we both really share in common, like we both really like talking about. But we found some stuff that we both are kind of interested in, or he's interested in a lot and I'm kind of interested in, and vice versa. I'm interested in a lot and he's kind of interested in. And then there's things where one of us is interested in it and the other person isn't at all. So for example, sport, I don't watch any sports at all. I don't really care. So whenever he talks about sport, I just, I say, yeah, cool. I don't have any good questions to ask him. So he's kind of noticed that and stopped talking about sport as much. And when he does do it, it's a short conversation, and that's fine. It's better than dragging it out really long. Now, for stuff that we both kind of enjoy, so we both kind of like golf. So I can ask him better questions about golf because I'm actually interested in it and I want to learn more about it, which means we can have longer and better conversations. And the quality is kind of more important than the quantity here. So I don't have that many questions to ask because I've only played golf once, but it does seem interesting, so I can ask questions about it. But I can't really ask really deep questions about golf because I don't know enough about it. But that's also going to improve as I learn more about it from listening to him. And because I have that interest there to begin with, I'm able to learn more about it, and then over time we develop better conversations. When we're not talking about those things, we're trying new things, so we talk about different things. And this isn't some agreed upon thing that we've talked about, like this just happens randomly. And okay, over time we're just finding more and more things and working out what we both like and what we don't like. And over time our conversations are just improving, and that's leading to our relationship improving. This is how it goes with anyone really. And you can speed up that process by just being more interested in them and learning more about what they like and don't like. If you've decided that the people you're around you don't share enough in common with, then I just made a video on how to know if you are in the right group and if you're hanging around the right people. You can see it on the screen now.